What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 4 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the San Francisco 49ers, a team that really over the last 4, 5, 6, 7 team reveals, many people surprised to see this team this high. So I'm really excited to break down why I am maybe a bit higher on the Niners this year, and also, of course, point out some of those potential weak points on this team that many of you, I'm sure, are concerned about. So it's going to be a fun one. Before we do get started, if you could do me a huge favor, just take a moment to hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy way to truly support my channel, and it really helps this series perform well. So I really appreciate it. While you're down there, do make sure you subscribe if you enjoy so you don't miss these last few deep dives as we wrap up the series. And then we'll get into my official record predictions, playoff predictions. That should be next Wednesday. Got a date for it now. Season starts up on Thursday. So we're there, man. The jitters are here. Can't wait for the season to start. But the first thing I want to talk about with the 49ers is actually this coaching staff, because for those that think this is too high, I would say this staff and my feelings about these coaches is the reason I am higher on this team. And I have Kyle Shanahan ranked as the number 1 head coach in the NFL, and the Niners ranking first in run game coaching, second in pass game coaching. But I also think it's important to remember that it's not just the offensive staff that's really good here. DeMeco Ryans and this defensive staff are going to rank 8th for me. And we'll talk about DeMeco Ryans and the incredible job he did last year, and he's going to be a head coach before too long here. But let's come back to Kyle Shanahan, who to me is the most impactful non-player of any person in the NFL. You feel his presence as the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the play designer here more than any other play caller in the league, in my opinion. And yes, it starts with his scheme, the wide zone offense, the play action shot plays, everything that almost the entire league at this point is trying to replicate some version of his scheme. And that's just a baseline to tell you how well this offense is built from the ground up. But what Kyle Shanahan does so much better and so much differently than pretty much any offensive mind in the league is A, he's an incredible play designer, and B, he's an incredible play caller. So from a play design perspective, he is constantly bringing in new formations, new play calls, different concepts into his scheme, constantly evolving and adapting this offense. You'll see him come out with these crazy formations with a fullback out wide and Debo who's in at running back, and Kittle's out wide, but Ayuk's in at tight end with his hand in the dirt. Like, he just does all this creative stuff that you would think it wouldn't work because it's so gimmicky, but it does more often than not with Kyle Shanahan. And a big reason he does that is because that plays into my next big asset that he has, and that is that he is the best play caller in the NFL. Not only that, he just knows when to pull what levers, when it's a good time to go to play action or go to a screen or run the ball on 2nd and long. Like, yeah, he's good from that perspective as a play caller, but you pair what we talked about with him as a play designer, and you put it on top of the fact that he is incredible at running these setup plays with pre-snap motion and all these crazy packages I talked about. And more so than any coach in the league, he has this unique, brilliant ability to see on the fly how a defense responds to all of that crazy shit that he does. Whether it's the motion pulling a linebacker or that him coming out in a package and he sees a certain alignment from the front, and he's able to react on the fly to what the defense does in response to his play calls. And then he has 4 different alternatives in his back pocket that he's going to bring out to 3 plays later or 3 drives later that are going to attack that certain way that the defense is preparing for his plays. So not only is he setting plays up like everybody does, well, not everybody, but most of the good play callers in the league run those setup plays. They run one thing to look like one play so that 2 drives later they can show the same thing, but it's something else. Well, Kyle Shanahan does that, but he's also incredibly adaptable in the way that he reads how defenses respond to what he's doing. And you do have, to me, the most well-run offense in the NFL, and now you're pairing that with a mobile quarterback. You had one of the least athletic starting quarterbacks in the league. You're now pairing this crazy, unpredictable offense with the threat of a read option element with yet another numbers advantage. That could blow up here for the Niners. And I almost expect that it will, given how much benefit of the doubt that Kyle Shanahan has earned. And you look at some of the stuff he did with Robert Griffin in Washington. He hasn't had the threat of a mobile quarterback like that since then. And I think he is chomping at the bit to unleash a whole new element to this offense that we haven't even seen yet. And I think defensive coordinators are terrified. And keep an eye on that Matt Eberflus, Kyle Shanahan week 1 matchup. A couple of really smart minds going at it. But that's your offensive setup. Obviously, incredibly optimistic there. It is the number 1 reason the Niners come in ranked 4th in my power rankings. But this defensive staff is not far behind in terms of that list of reasons. To me, DeMeco Ryans easily could have been hired as a defensive coordinator. He has done such a great job since Robert Saleh left. And honestly, I like Robert Saleh. I think DeMeco Ryans is even more creative and even a better, potentially, like, leader of this defense. I'm not trying to slight Robert Saleh. I think he's really good. But to me, DeMeco Ryans had this defense playing like a team infected with rabies. And I got to credit Brett Coleman, who kicked off this series as a guest and has been mentioned several times throughout this series, but he came up with that, and it couldn't be a more accurate representation of how this defense plays. He has a truly unique front, and you also need to credit their defensive line coach, Chris Kokurik, who I would say is odds-on favorite to replace DeMeco Ryans as the defensive coordinator next year when Ryans, to me, inevitably gets a head coaching offer. But their ability to run stunts and just create chaos up front, it's truly unique. It's something I will talk more about when we get into the defensive line portion of this video, but that stands out. And then he's got a good balance of coverage on the back end. You're going to see certainly a lot of the existing cover 3 elements with that Robert Saleh modern Seattle 3 defense leaving last year, but they got even more split safety, which is that meta around the league where you're going to see a lot of quarters, a lot of cover 6. The Niners did stay away from cover 2 for the most part last year. Maybe they'll mix that up, but their 3 biggest coverages were cover 3, cover 1, and cover 4, and then cover 6 after that. So yeah, there's your defense, and this staff is really special, man. I think it's up there with any staff in the league if you want to debate who the best coaching staff is, and honestly, I'd probably take this team. But their offseason did not come without questions. Some good, some bad with their key departures and additions. Let's recap what shook down over the offseason here for the Niners. So as far as the big departures here, they do lose Mike McDaniel, their run game coordinator. I certainly glossed over Chris Forrester and Bobby Slowick, who are the new quote-unquote offensive coordinators here. We know it's Kyle Shanahan's offense, but Chris Forrester is going to be filling in as the run game coordinator, whereas Bobby Slowick is going to be the pass game coordinator. McDaniel was more of their run game coordinator last year. Anyway, it's a notable loss. It's a guy that is now a head coach in the league that's no longer a part of this staff. But from a roster perspective, definitely some pretty notable losses for this team that I will admit I'm concerned about. They are going to have some young players and some new players step up here with the losses on this offensive line. Laken Tomlinson, a really good player, heading to the Jets. Alex Mack hanging up the cleats, had another good year last year for the Niners. So that interior offensive line, as we'll see later, is going to be a major question mark for this team. And then defensively, losing some good veterans here. Not so much Jaquiski Tart. I think he stinks. He just got cut by the Eagles, but he was a starting safety for them last year, and he is the reason they didn't go to the Super Bowl, dropping that interception against the Rams. But besides that point, you lose DJ Jones, who really impressed me watching this team back as their best, I don't want to say true defensive tackle, but let's just say best defensive tackle, not named Eric Armstead. And then Kwan Williams, also I've talked a lot about in this series as maybe one of the more underrated players in the entire league, was awesome for this team last year. So that slot corner position, they're looking to replace that with a 5th-round rookie out of Toledo in Samuel Womack. So some obvious questions there. Also, Tom Compton no longer here. He filled in for Mike McGlinchey, who is their starting offensive tackle, who should be back healthy now. Kentavious Street was another good rotational pass rusher for them, along with Arden Key. And then Josh Norman, this is important to remember when we get to their secondary, where they do have some question marks. It's important to remember that Josh Norman actually played 768 snaps for this team last year, and they made it work. So I just want to note that right now. He was not good for them. But he's no longer here. And then the big additions, you really have some kind of mid-round rookies that are going to be key contributors for this team. I mentioned Samuel Womack, who they're going to ask to start in the slot, believe it or not. But Spencer Bierford is going to be starting on this offensive line most likely. 4th rounder out of UTSA. They do get Javon Kinlaw back, who got hurt in, I think, week 2 last year. 1st-round pick 2 years ago with immense upside. Drake Jackson in the 2nd round, an edge rusher to get a part of that rotation. And then they also add some speed at wide receiver in Danny Gray and a veteran safety in George Odom from the Colts. So a busy offseason, and I think just on paper, you would look at this and say a net negative, honestly, with some of those losses. But obviously going to be leaning into the youth here. And as we now break down this roster and start with the quarterback conversation, the exchange going from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance is something that they're hoping can be an upgrade here. And I think as a baseline, week 1, you can't really say with any surefire evidence that Trey Lance is going to be a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, let's just get it out the gate. They just worked it out with Jimmy Garoppolo, and if they get to week 8 and Trey Lance literally sucks, they can go back to Jimmy Garoppolo now, which I think is an underrated move for them. And the fact that this locker room loves Jimmy and they worked it out, it's just kind of a feel-good vibe and increases the floor a little bit here. So I do like that. But right now I have them ranked 25th at quarterback under Trey Lance. And a lot of people wondering, how are the Niners ranking 4th with basically a rookie at quarterback? Well, I mentioned a lot of the stuff that he's going to be able to do now, or Kyle Shanahan's going to be able to do with Trey Lance as a running threat. And I'll go ahead and show the running threats graphic here, where they're 4th in the league for me with that quarterback run multiplier. The run game as a whole gets a 6% boost, according to my formula, that wasn't there before with Jimmy Garoppolo. And it could be even higher than that when paired with all of the setup, crazy play calling that I've already talked about with Kyle Shanahan. So I think just as a baseline for this offense that was really good last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, who's maybe the 21st best quarterback in the NFL, as a baseline, you are going to get an incredibly explosive run game that's a nuisance for teams to predict. And as we start to take a look in a little bit at some of these playmakers and their run after catch ability, you're at least going to get an incredible run game and a good manufactured passing game, if that makes sense. Be it first reads off of play action, screen game, run after catch, easy slants, RPOs, all of that stuff is going to be there. So, and that's just a natural part of being a quarterback with Kyle Shanahan as your play caller with these receivers. Like Nick Mullins has been productive here. Jimmy Garoppolo has been to 2 NFC championships and a Super Bowl here. So I'm not worried that Trey Lance can run that side of the offense. The question is, is the drop back passing game going to take a step back where Jimmy Garoppolo is fine? He's good at navigating a pocket and making good decisions for the most part, reading defenses. But he certainly isn't great So it's really not hard to imagine a world where Trey Lance is actually an upgrade in the drop back passing game as well. And it could just be a case where they tell Trey, like, you know, if our first read isn't there, just take off and run, and you might pick it up, or you might extend the play and have some crazy good throw on the move, which he's more than capable of doing, and move the chains. Or they'll just punt and live to see another day and trust that they'll get back at it with the next drive and have a great defense do their thing. So I definitely lean more towards the side of optimism with everything with Trey Lance. It's not like they're going from Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers to Trey Lance. No, they're going from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance. And like I said, they could even just go back to Jimmy if this is a disaster. So I lean towards optimism. I think Trey is definitely like a sneaky MVP candidate as well. That might be going a little bit too far here, because I just don't know if he's going to be as accurate, as good of a decision maker as a passer to get that type of, voting. But man, I think he's going to be pretty damn good, and is more likely than not going to be, or at least prove out to be, an upgrade to this offense as a whole. So I have them ranked 25th heading into the year here, and I don't expect that to hold. I think top 20 is likely. Top 10 that might be rich, but top 12, top 14 is possible. And then I also like Brock Purdy. Not going to spend a lot of time on him, but I thought there was a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo-esque traits in there, with the kind of fluidity in the pocket and the quick release, some of the mobility stuff that Jimmy can do, that point guard style quarterback. I like Brock Purdy. One note is some of these guys are probably getting cut while I'm recording this. I need to keep working here. We still have 3 more of these deep dives to get through before the season starts here. So I'm just going to note that some players I talk about here will end up getting cut or put on the practice squad. It is what it is. Just wanted to be transparent about that. But yeah, let's move on and talk about these weapons, where it's a huge asset for this offense. They rank 7th in the league, and I think quite clearly the 49ers have the best group of receivers in the league after the catch, and that all plays in perfectly with a quarterback that, like I said, you don't know necessarily how good the drop back passing game is going to be, but when you're throwing these guys screens and easy manufactured touches on first reads, they're going to boost how successful those plays are by how good Debo, Ayuk, and George Kittle specifically, but even Juwan Jennings a little bit, are after the catch, where they'll make an 8-yard slant turn into a 20-yard completion. And that really applies to all these guys, but specifically with Debo Samuel, who I don't even know how you could argue at this point that anybody else is better after the catch. They literally put him at running back, and he was one of the better running backs in the league because he's so big, accelerates so fast, and, well, big for a receiver, so effective with a stiff arm and breaking arm tackles. Like, that all shows after the catch, and there's multiple times last year where they just flipped him a screen and he took it 60 yards to the house. Like, he had a legitimate case for being one of the most valuable players in the league last year because he was the lifeblood of this offense. So to get him back here is super substantial. Like, it was everything to get him back. There's no way I would rank them 4th without Debo here. So he stole the show last year. As a receiver, he's like a good route runner. He has good hands, but it is that run after catch ability that truly makes him. It's tough balance because he doesn't get an elite grade from me, but he is an elite playmaker. It's, again, a tough balance there. But it doesn't stop there. You have Brandon Ayuk, who I think is poised for big things here this year. I think really came on late last year. I think Shanahan had a little bit of a tough love coaching strategy with him, was kind of in the doghouse to start the year, but he took it well, and as the year went on, he really was this team's go-to number 2 receiver, and on a lot of plays, their number 1 wide receiver, because Debo was in there at running back. And he has more of a traditional wide receiver skill set than even Debo. I think his ability to win on the outside, release, and stack corners on the perimeter, to run double moves, and have a more diversified route tree. In a lot of ways, he is their X wide receiver. So I think based on everything he showed down the stretch last year, based on all of the reports on how good he's looked, he's poised to be a dominant number 2 weapon for this team. And I think the arrow is even pointing up for Brandon Ayuk, who was a first-round pick several years ago. I like Juwan Jennings as well. He's kind of the perfect third wide receiver for this offense. And we've seen his kind of breakout last year has allowed Kyle Shanahan to even adapt some of that Sean McVay stuff where they're actually in more 11 personnel. And Juwan Jennings, it's pretty funny that we had the Rams offense, we had the Packers offense, where we talked about Cooper Kupp, we talked about Ben Skoranek in that that kind of undersized tight end role. We talked about Allen Lazard in that role, and now it's Juwan Jennings. Like, they're all kind of the same player. Cooper Kupp obviously does some crazy shit that Juwan Jennings can't do. But yeah, big-bodied receiver, one of the best blocking receivers in the league, really good after the catch, sure-handed guy, and Juwan Jennings even has quick feet. He's a pretty good route runner. The problem with him is just that top-end speed. So he's basically a tight end here, and he's just utilized well within this scheme. And as long as Ayuk and Debo are healthy, I'm more than happy with Juwan Jennings as a wide receiver 3. But then you also draft Danny Gray in the 3rd round, which is not insignificant. Someone with incredible speed, ran in the 4.3s, and showed that off immediately in their debut with Trey Lance and Danny Gray out there in their first preseason game, where he gets open deep down the sideline and Trey Lance drops a dime right into his hands for a deep touchdown. Now, that was against a 7th string cornerback, so we'll see how that is against starters, but there's something there. And Danny Gray's got a lot of speed, and honestly, before he ran his 40, I didn't see him as just a speed guy. I liked his route running and some of his prowess as a receiver, so he's definitely an interesting 3rd-round player to keep an eye on here. And within this scheme, I think he's in a perfect spot to just be the 4th receiver, play 10, 15 snaps on very specific assignments, and provide some of that deep threat ability to take the top off a little bit. And then things kind of continue to make sense as you go down the depth chart. You got Ray McLeod, who's kind of a gadget type, so they might run some jet sweeps and some of those manufactured touches with him. So a really nice receiver room. And then you have an elite tight end in George Kittle. And I do think George Kittle has the crown right now as the best blocking tight end in the NFL, but he's not just that. He is, I think at this point, the 3rd best receiving tight end. I think Mark Andrews has passed him up, but it doesn't mean George Kittle is not an elite player. His speed shows over the middle. Linebackers can't cover him, and corners can't even keep up with him sometimes. Remarkable after the catch, where he's violent and really good at landing stiff arms and running through arm tackles. Sometimes that is why he gets hurt quite a lot, though, because he is such a physical player on every single play. He's got enough route running to get to the 2nd level and run a corner route or a dig route or an out route. So this offense is obviously at their best when George Kittle is healthy. That's not always going to be the case, but right now he's good to go, and you hope you can get a good bill of health from him as the season goes on. Behind him, you got Charlie Warner, who I like. Just a good balanced backup tight end, jack of all trades, master of none type. And then you got to throw Kyle Juszczyk in there, listed as a tight end there, but plays a little bit of everything. And it's more of the decoy the decoy element that he brings, but he's just a very adequate receiving player. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, but enough route running prowess, enough hands, enough run after the catch that when put in a scheme that you're already worried about so much other stuff, Shanahan will find ways to get him open down the sideline or flip him a screen or an underneath check down. He'll do some different stuff and be an option in this passing game. They also pick up Tyler Kroft, balanced veteran tight end, to probably compete for that 4th tight end spot with Ross Dwelley. Don't imagine Troy Fumagalli will be on the 53. Then you've got these running backs. I don't think they have some crazy impact from these backs in the receiving game. I think Elijah Mitchell's very solid, could certainly grow to show more in that area of the game, but there's not really anything to be overly critical of Elijah Mitchell in the receiving game either. He's a sound piece. Then you've got a bunch of players that are kind of unproven in that regard. Jeff Wilson has been around here. I think he can handle it, but nothing special. Ty Davis-Price, a rookie there, who was hardly utilized in the receiving game at LSU. And Trey Sermon was pretty good in the receiving game in those 4 games that he played at Ohio State that led to him being a third-round pick. But again, still pretty underutilized in that department and kind of in the doghouse in San Francisco. So obviously a group that's really going to help Trey Lance, and even in the way that these guys win with their run after catch ability within this scheme, it's maybe the most quarterback friendly environment for at least for a young player that isn't going to be fully up to speed as far as reading defenses and making tough decisions. Shanahan and these receivers are going to make things significantly easier on Trey Lance than, let's just say, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville or, other opportunities for these young quarterbacks. But now we have to talk about this offensive line, and this is, I would say, the biggest concern for me. Obviously, Trey Lance is a question mark, but I'm not really concerned about the quarterback room. I look at this offensive line, and there's legitimate concerns here. I trust Kyle Shanahan. I trust John Lynch. I trust their scheme to help these guys, and they have gotten key breakouts on this O-line, or at least no-name guys to step up and play okay. But, man, you look at this interior, and it's the worst interior offensive line in the league. It's like I said, super concerning. Now, you do have a great tackle duo. You have Trent Williams at left tackle, who really has the crown right now as the best offensive tackle in football, and that's because of what he does as a run blocker. He is a legendary run blocker, and he alone is a weapon for this offense. Could have just listed him on that last screen. The way that they weaponize him in the run game by pulling him on tosses and getting him going on screens and getting him on the move in this wide zone offense where he can help pass off a defensive end and then climb up to the second level where sometimes, he'll take out an outside linebacker with ease, but sometimes he'll take that outside linebacker and use him as a shield to go block a safety. He is insane as a run blocker. And it's technique, it's athleticism, it's playing with rabies, it's all of it. He's incredible, one of the most fun players to watch in the entire NFL, and a huge asset for this team, especially in the run game. Pass protection's really good from him. I have him as a great pass protector, but not an elite pass protector there. You will see him lose in that area of the game. Then you go to the other side. You got Mike McGlinchey coming back. I could see him having a kind of breakout year in his own right. I believe they declined his 5th-year option. I think that's mostly health-related. He has had a hard time staying healthy, but someone that he gives up his chest too much in pass protection, and he's really tall, and isn't the guy. He doesn't have the best anchor as a player, so he really does struggle against lengthy, powerful rushers. And that might be something they don't want to really keep around here forever, but it is something he can work on, improving his punches, playing with better pad discipline. So, he could improve there as a pass protector. But all in all, he's still a really good tackle because he is like-minded, I suppose, as a run blocker. You have kind of a baby version of Trent Williams with him to weaponize him in the run game when he's healthy. He's a great athlete, he can get up on the move, and really delete guys to the perimeter with his athleticism and his run block ability. But definitely noteworthy that he's not some great pass protector. And Niners fans are well aware of that at this point. But yeah, that interior group is shady, man. You've got Aaron Banks at left guard. Granted, was a second-round pick last year, but I thought was one of the worst picks in last year's draft. I had, I believe, a 4th to a 5th-round grade on him, and I thought he was a horrible scheme fit. I wanted him on the Patriots or the Texans or somewhere that they were running more of a power gap type of scheme, or even a more inside zone heavy scheme like Pittsburgh is run. In a wide zone offense where you're asking these guys to get on the move and pass block from moving pockets, I couldn't have drawn up a much worse fit for Aaron Banks. So I don't know. Apparently he's in better shape and looks like a different player. I'll believe it when I see it. I trust these guys, but for him to be your replacement at left guard, definitely concerned about it. Then at center, very much unknown commodity, Jake Brendel. They don't seem worried about him. He's a veteran. They didn't really do much with this center position. He's played fine when given small opportunities. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if he's an adequate kind of starting caliber center here for the Niners, but he's going to have to prove that. I think he's the piece of these three that I'm the least worried about. Although I also like Spencer Bierford. I didn't think he'd be starting at guard in year one, but the call is having to be answered here. I liked him as a tackle prospect. I thought he was a really good value when they got him, and he's got really good technique when he played tackle. Really good hand usage, really good at protecting his outside shoulder in his dropbacks at left tackle. So moving inside here, interesting fit. He is a lighter player, so that can be hit or miss. Sometimes these guys can use their technique, being a former tackle, and be just fine at guard. Sometimes they get overwhelmed by power moving inside. So that's going to be wait and see in pass protection. Run blocking, I do think he's a good fit. He's a really good athlete. I believe he was like a former 4 or 5-star commit that decided to stay close to home and go to UTSA. And that showed in the run game, especially in wide zone blocks. I thought he was just fine there. So again, moving inside, there might be some play strength concerns, but I'm optimistic for Spencer Bierford. But the collection of these three guys together, how can you not be skeptical that this offensive line is going to be able to keep Trey Lance upright in the drop back passing game? So it's an obvious concern, and I think the biggest red flag for this entire team is that interior offensive line. Now, they do have some options as far as depth. You have Daniel Brunskill, who was actually their starting right guard last year. So, some issues on the interior offensive line are not new for this team. And you also have to remember that Tom Compton was their starting right tackle last year. So it's not like they're going from a perfect O-line last year to this. But Brunskill's got a lot of experience and could potentially play center if Brendel sucks, or left guard if Aaron Banks sucks. So you do have an answer there to at least go back to one of your starters from last year. Jalen Moore was, I think, a 5th-round pick for this team in 2020. He's been a decent backup for them. Then you got Colton McKivitz, who they drafted last year. Nick Zakelj, a 6th or 7th-round pick this year. And then you also got to keep an eye on Jason Poe, really interesting player. Incredible athlete to the point that he was actually being worked out for some teams as a fullback. He was a monster on lead blocks, pulling wide zone offense. But the problem with him is he's 6 feet tall. He would be the shortest offensive lineman in the league. And I think he has 30-inch arms, maybe even 29 and a half. So can he hold up at the next level? He's, as far as this recording, still on the team. Wouldn't be surprised if he ends up practice squatted by the time this video is out. But certainly, either way, someone to keep an eye on. So overall, I feel pretty good about what you're getting, or at least feel pretty good about knowing what we're getting here. Your run blocking, I'm not worried about, especially when you talk about these different skill player blockers. George Kittle, the best blocking tight end. Charlie Warner's very good. Kyle Juszczyk, possibly the best blocking fullback in the league, right there with Patrick Ricard. Jawan Jennings is a monster as a blocking receiver. So, like, the run blocking side of things, when paired with this scheme, I think is going to be just fine, if not very good. But when they get to their drop back passing game, let's just say they're going to really want to avoid those situations, because from a pass pro perspective, they're one of the worst in the league for drop back pass pro. And you have Trey Lance that's just, I don't know if he's ready to go for the drop back passing game. So they're going to really want to stay ahead of the chains and avoid those situations. But to tie a ribbon on the offense, let's talk about the rest of the running threats here. So we already talked about Trey Lance getting that QB multiplier, 4th highest in the league. He's going to provide so many numbers advantages here, and it is going to amplify this run game to, I guess, an underrated proportion, maybe would be the way that I want to phrase that. As far as the running backs themselves, I don't think they're going to change things too much here. Now, I didn't make time to picture like Debo here on the graphic. I don't think they're going to use him too much like they did last year. I think that was a lot of injury related and special circumstance. He kind of made it pretty clear to me that he doesn't really want to be used in that way. Now, I think he'll still get 2 or 3 carries a game, but I think his impact and his ability after the catch is more than well represented by that 90 receiving grade that we gave him. So he's a really unique, variable to put into a formula like this. You could picture Debo here, and when he's out there, he's probably like an 85 grade as a running back. But again, I don't think they're really going to do too much of that. Occasionally, yes, but for the most part, I think it's going to be Elijah Mitchell if he's healthy, who showed to be a good back. Kind of your typical Shanahan back, good long speed, good vision, a little bit more size with Elijah Mitchell than they've had in the past with like Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert, so he can run through some arm tackles and fight for some tough yardage. I like Elijah Mitchell. He's a good back, and I think going to have a really productive season if he's healthy. But this is going to be a hot hand approach, an RBBC. Again, a little bit of Debo mixed in there. You've got Jeff Wilson, who's a solid backup here. He's stuck around, and he's been a productive player. When they've gone to him, he's got some nice speed for this outside zone scheme. They draft Ty Davis-Price in the 3rd round. I still don't really know why, with how much they've shown to be able to basically rotate and recycle these running backs to spend a 3rd-round pick on Ty Davis-Price that I thought was more of a 5th or a 6th-round guy. That was a head-scratcher. I don't see him being too great here. I didn't think he was like the most explosive player for an outside zone scheme like this, but he's not a bad athlete. He could be another good back here if they turn to him. I don't know if they will or not. Trey Sermon's definitely kind of in the doghouse, it seems. Talented player, I think, in the wrong scheme. He's kind of a contact balance, even like a downhill like power runner at times. I don't love him in an outside zone scheme like this, and I think that's a part of why he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities, but I think he could still play pretty well if they were forced, quote-unquote, to go to him. Jordan Mason as well, probably going to ultimately be a practice squatter here, but had a good preseason. So they rank 25th for me with running backs. It's a group that I would just say doesn't elevate this run game. It just allows it to exist as one of the better run games in the league, given everything else around them. And that takes us to our offensive summary, where I have them ranked as the 8th best offense in the NFL. And some people are going to say that's too high, but I just think the baseline that you get here is so good. For one, that run game is really going to help them stay ahead of the chains and inflict pain on defenses. They have one of the best run games in the league for me, 4th in the league, really good from a run block perspective. Of course, the coaching is going to amplify this thing, paired with the threat of now a running quarterback. They're going to be hitting you left and right and center and all over the place with this run game. They're going to keep you on your heels. They're going to keep you guessing. And before you can even think, you've got Trent Williams smashing you in the face, George Kittle down blocking you, Kyle Juszczyk coming out of nowhere. Like, this is going to be probably behind the Ravens for the most annoying run game to try and defend. And then from a pass game perspective, I think they have a really nice floor because, again, the coaching, but also just like the weaponry, the run after catch, their manufactured offense, their manufactured passing game is still going to be really good. And then you are, I think, going to run into some issues with the pass protection and potentially at quarterback if and when they get into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12. Those are those situations where I think they're basically just going to hope that Trey Lance can improvise and run around and find Debo, find Kittle. I don't think they're going to have this really efficient drop back passing game, but I think that's okay. I think everything else around them is good to go, and they can help shelter some of those issues with the interior offensive line and the youth they have at quarterback. So they're 8th for me at offense, and then this defense, I think, is being massively slept on. I already talked about the coaching staff and how highly I perceive this unit, but we get to start by talking about this defensive line that I haven't had so much fun watching a defensive line in a long time, and it's a credit to these players, and it's a credit to DeMeco Ryans, and their defensive line coach, I'm going to get to know this name better. I think it's Chris Kochurik. But there's cross stunts, and then there's what the Niners do with this defensive line. I will reiterate the point that Brett Coleman made. This defensive line plays with rabies. They are 8-9 players deep of guys with get off and strength and ability to just immediately gain leverage and blow shit up. And that might sound like a dramatization of how this D-line plays, but that is literally their defensive approach. They put these amazing linebackers behind these guys that are good at diagnosing runs and playing with discipline, and they just have these guys, really with the exception of Nick Bosa, just be assigned a gap and just blow it up, create chaos. Another great analogy, and it's been really fun to see like other analysts I really respect noticed the same thing I did. It was Brett Coleman said it with the rabies comment, and more recently on the Athletic Football Show, Robert Mays and those guys were talking about how playing against this 49ers defensive line is like trying to run into a hurricane. And that's another great analogy. This is seriously such a unique defensive line in the way that they rotate these guys, and they crash and they fire off the ball, and it's so difficult to play against. I don't even know what you do against that, because from a run defense perspective, these guys are going to blow up gaps and get offensive linemen out of position, and then you have these great linebackers to fill. And from a pass rush perspective, you're pairing that with really good coaching where they're doing different cross stunts and stuff and different blitzes that you're so worried about who are you picking up and who are you supposed to pass off and grab that you forgot that K'Wan Williams last year, or, any blitzing defensive back, or Fred Warner, whoever it may be, you forget that you have to pick someone else up. So it's just a chaotic defensive line that, yes, play with high energy and yes, get schemed up well, but they're good players in their own right as well. So, of course, from a player perspective, this starts with Nick Bosa, who I think is underrated. I think he should be in the conversation with Myles Garrett and TJ Watt for the best edge rusher in the NFL. His numbers, his pass rush productivity, and just his tape, it's right there with those guys. It really is. He has better athleticism than his brother Joey. He has one of the best first steps in the league, if not the best. He has a combination of pass rush technique where he can bring out different swim moves and clubs and different stuff, cross chop. But he also can go to power. He's yacked up. He can land those arms and use that get off to his best advantage to convert speed to power. He's got bend for a powerful player. I would not be the least bit surprised if Nick Bosa gets a defensive player this year or sometime soon, or even takes the crown as the best pass rusher in football behind Aaron Donald. And he's a good run defender as well when he wants to be. He's got all the traits to do it, knows what he's looking at. So this D-line starts with them, but it doesn't end there. You have Eric Armstead, who typically plays next to Nick Bosa, but not always. They'll use him in a lot of different ways. He's a big part of all of these cross stunts that they run because he's got such good get off and length to occupy an offensive lineman, where you can then wrap in a Samson Ebukam or a Drake Jackson this year, whoever it might be around him. And to me, really took a step up last year as far as his ability to consistently win one-on-one matchups as a pass rusher. They stuck him on the interior much more this year than they ever have. He's been kind of a hybrid end, but I think really got comfortable as a true defensive tackle last year, and they'll keep him there, and he could even continue to get better. He can be a little bit more hit or miss as a run defender, typically very good. Uses those long arms well to shed and has that long reach to finish arm tackles and stuff. Typically very good, but there are occasional plays, occasional games where he is a lighter, taller defensive tackle, and double teams, he can get driven back because he is a bit of a hybrid player. But for the most part, he'll be used in a situation where that's not exploited. And then the next guy I want to talk about is Samson Ebukam, who's very underrated as well. He's the lead dog in the I'm playing with rabies club. Like, he is a one-trick pony, but I still don't know how you defend that one trick when you also have to worry about Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa. He has remarkable get-off. To me, he looks like he's put on about 15 pounds since his Rams days, where he was kind of a off-the-ball edge type. He looks really strong. He plays really strong. He can generate a bull rush. But for the most part, they're lining him up as a 5-tech or a 7-tech, and they're having him just slant inside of the tackle. And he's going to just create chaos. That's his job. But he is kind of a force multiplier to this pass rush. And sometimes he'll knife through, and because of the confusion and the get off, he will get through and create pressures and get sacks himself. Now, they will also send him around the edge. They don't want to do the same thing with him every play. And his get off, his bend shows off the edge as well. That can be a threat in its own right. So he's a really good player. Not a whole lot of discipline as a run defender, but because of his presence and how they use him in all of those ways I just described, he's that hurricane up front, creating chaos, and does a good job in all of those difficult, high traffic situations of kind of navigating and finding the ball carrier. So he's not useless against the run. Now, what's really fascinating to me is the concept of sprinkling Javon Kinlaw into this now existing defensive line. When Kinlaw was out there week 1, week 2, they hadn't really discovered this identity yet. And if Kinlaw's good at one thing, it is his get off and his length and his disruptive pass rush ability. So in a scheme now that can just plug him right into that role as a guy that's just going to shoot gaps and play with his hair on fire, he has incredible potential to boost this pass rush beyond even what it was last year. He's got a lot of tools. He's got to stay healthy, and frankly, he's got to put it together off the field. Has to continue refining his just, film study and technique and all of that, his preparation. And that's where you hope it might show up for him to be a better run defender, because he was not good at South Carolina and was not good as a rookie, was not good in the 2 games he played last year. He plays upright and doesn't seem to give a damn against the run. So that's a concern there is Kinlaw. That's where you're going to see them rotate in some other pieces probably on earlier downs. But this is a pretty scary group just to start with there. Now, we've got a lot of depth to talk about as well. So Charles Omenihu was really good for this team. He was an acquisition mid-season, and his productivity spiked immediately in this system. He's kind of he is totally a tweener, but he's kind of an Eric Armstead type on this D-line. They'll use him a lot as like a 4-eye, great for these cross stunts, but he's a really nice piece. I'm a fan of Charles Omenihu's game, and that was a good acquisition, an underrated acquisition to go and get him. Then they draft Drake Jackson. I think they see a ton of Samson Ebukam in Drake Jackson. Drake, who, similar to Samson Ebukam, was lighter, 250 pounds at USC, but put on about 20 pounds in his pre-draft process. And the Niners probably saw that, and they were like, we can get a amplified version of Samson Ebukam in Drake Jackson, and that's what he can be. I mean, Drake Jackson was a good pass rush prospect for me. I think in a lot of drafts, he would have been a first-round pick, but this year's class was so deep that he kind of got forgotten about. Really great first step, showed a ton of bend. I thought he was one of the 3 most bendy pass rushers in this class. It was just a matter of continuing to improve his pass rush skill set, and I wanted to see him add weight and play with more power, and he did that. So he's got some scary upside, honestly, especially with this defensive line, with what they've done with this group. I'd be pretty optimistic for what he can bring, and in this system, I think he can be an impact rotational player day one. I mean, Jordan Willis, rinse, repeat with everything we've said about get off and length and just disruptive ability. I don't even know if he'll make this team with all the depth they have, but he's another piece. And then Kerry Hyder, another guy, I don't know if he's going to ultimately make this team, but very familiar with schemes like this, a hybrid defensive end. They have a type with those bigger bodied edge types. I will say the interior depth is not quite as good. You're really leaning on Javon Kinlaw to be good there. I like Kevin Givens. He really heated up late last season, and I'm not surprised that it's taken him a couple years to make an impact. I think he can be a good third piece and a lighter player. I think he's about 6 foot, 300 pounds, so probably never going to be a great run defender, but he was an impact defensive lineman for them last year, and he could see some added opportunities if Kinlaw really can't elevate his game. I like Hassan Ridgeway as well as a fourth defensive tackle. He's fine, but not an impact player. Akeem Spence, we'll see if he makes the team. He's a tenured pass rusher on the inside. So much thinner on the inside. They really use their scheme to compensate for a lack of play strength and gap discipline. In fact, I'm not sure gap discipline is really in this team's dictionary with how they stunt and attack up front. So they have a type. It's a really fun defensive line. Watch them week 1 against that Bears offensive line, and you're not going to think I'm crazy for saying this is the second best pass rush in the NFL, because that's where I've got them ranked. This group is virtually impossible to block, and it's a massive reason this team ranks 4th for me in the NFL overall. From a run defense perspective, they rank 16th because the pieces themselves aren't great at defending the run, but again, the scheme protects these guys a lot, so I'm not really worried about their run defense. I think it'll be just fine. No one could run on these guys in the playoffs last year. That said, DJ Jones was a piece here that was probably their best interior run defender, at least as far as eating blocks and all that. I don't know if they have that piece this year. Before we go any further with the video, I want to take a second to tell you about my friends at SeatGeek. I truly believe that SeatGeek outclasses all of the other ticketing apps. It's where I buy all of my tickets, and for good reason. I really enjoyed partnering with them. They're great with me, but they just have the best app, the best user interface. They have the best prices. You get your tickets immediately. They have customer support. Again, I really think you should be buying your tickets on SeatGeek. If you're going to football games, other sporting events, concerts, do it on SeatGeek. And now using promo code FranchiseGuy, you will save $20 on your first purchase. And all the better, you're going to support my channel in the process. So again, that's promo code FranchiseGuy on SeatGeek. Let's get back to the video. But then we have that aforementioned linebacking group. Outstanding group, probably the best linebacking duo in the NFL with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Fred's elite. I think he is the best linebacker in the NFL right now. He's got the whole package, man. He's a brilliant coverage defender. Just that ability to cover players, not grass. Find people to cover. Don't just wave your arms around and let the quarterback dictate your coverage. No, like drop to your assignment. Read the concept and go get somebody. And Fred Warner does that as good as anybody in the league. And he's got length and just overall intelligence and quickness to be a good man-to-man defender or zone, whatever it may be. He is the best cover linebacker in the NFL. And he makes a case to be the best run defending linebacker in the NFL at times as well. He's not quite as big as Demario Davis or Devin White or some of these other really good run defending linebackers. But he uses his hip fluidity so well to get in and out of blocks. He has those long arms with plenty of strength to shed. He has incredible play diagnostics. He's unreal. He's one of the true elite game-changing linebackers in the NFL, and there's not a whole lot. There's a handful of them in the NFL. And I feel like I need to reiterate, he's a big reason they're allowed to play so chaotic and undisciplined up front, because he can read everything out and still get there. There's no clear pictures for these linebackers, and he doesn't need it. Dre Greenlaw is kind of an extension of Fred Warner. He's not as gifted. He's not quite as instinctive, but he's super well balanced as well. I like him in coverage. I like him in run defense. I think he's a really good player, and either going to get a good contract here by the 49ers or someone else is going to pay him that 3-year, $45 million deal that surprises everybody, because he's just a really good starter. He'd be the number one linebacker on a lot of teams. So, yeah, he's an extension of Fred Warner. Rounds out a group for me that's first in linebacker coverage and third in linebacker run defense. They have some depth. Azeez Al-Shaair, I think, is poised to be the replacement for Dre Greenlaw. I think athletically speaking, they see very similar players, and in the opportunities that Al-Shaair has gotten, he's played pretty well. So they like him. He's a really good backup. He would probably start for a lot of teams around the league. And then they have a converted safety type in Flanagan Fowles. Very minimal opportunities, but a good special teamer, decent backup. Oren Burks, another special teamer type, they bring it over from Green Bay, and then some undrafted types that probably won't all make the team. I will note that Olubi and Marcelino Ball are good athletes and kind of in that mold that they have built for these Niners linebackers. Fred Warner and even Burks here and Flanagan Fowles. These guys were all basically safeties in college who are now moving to linebacker in the NFL. And then we get to the secondary, where it's a very solid group. I think there are some question marks here, but the question marks that exist, I can see their process and can see how they view those players as good players. And that's Samuel Womack in the nickel and Talanoa Hufanga, or whoever they want to play at safety this year. Could also be George Odom or Tayshaun Gibson, to be determined there. But you have a good starting cornerback duo. I think Charvarius Ward is very underrated, although now that people saw the contract he got, I think people are waking up. He was a really good corner for the Chiefs, and he's a really good press man guy. Like I said, the Niners like cover one. They like to get in these guys' face and run cover one, and Charvarius Ward's going to be able to do that. And in cover three, he can be a press man guy, and quarters, I think he can handle that stuff as well, and they can press him in quarters. Off coverage, zone feel, I wouldn't describe that as a strength for Charvarius Ward, so there's going to be some different kind of ways to use him versus how not to use him, I think, here. But for the most part, I like the signing. They needed a kind of surefire starter here instead of having to lean on Ambry Thomas to break out. I wouldn't say they needed it, but it was a good move to make. So he's a good starter, and then Emmanuel Moseley's a good starter as well. A very different player from Charvarius Ward, really instinctive off-man zone corner. Not bad in man coverage. Like, he can get in guys' face and run down the sideline, but he's more of a intelligent, quick type of corner than he is a big physical, long speed type like Charvarius Ward. But he's not slow. He's a good player. Again, two good starting corners on the outside. What's interesting is they're replacing K'Wan Williams here, who was awesome last year, with a fifth-round rookie out of Toledo in Samuel Womack. Now, I did not do an eval on Samuel Womack. Wasn't on my draft board. So he's a total kind of wait-and-see, call it boom or bust aspect of this secondary. Really good workout grades, good 40 time, excellent agility scores, good reports coming out of camp. I can't give him too high of a grade coming in here, but given how many different pieces they've moved in and out of this secondary, how good this coaching staff is, I have full faith that he's going to be a good player for them. You know, fifth round, undrafted, young nickel corners coming into the league and being pleasantly surprising is almost the norm around the league, and for that to be the case here with Samuel Womack, certainly not going to surprise me. So we'll see how he plays, and definitely going to monitor him closely as the year goes on. Now, I will say they don't have to play Samuel Womack at nickel corner. If he wasn't good, and here's what I'm getting at. Ambry Thomas is a really freaking good player, and the fact that a fifth-round rookie earned that starting nickel spot, I think, is a ringing endorsement of Samuel Womack and a good reason to not be too worried about it. If they get to the regular season and he struggles, they can move some pieces around here. I think Emmanuel Moseley can play in the slot, and they can start Ambry Thomas on the outside, just as they did for the second half of last season, where, honestly, Ambry Thomas was one of the better corners in the NFL from like week 13 on. And I liked Ambry Thomas a lot coming out. Really fluid athlete, good size, good speed, and someone that, you know, is really clean in man coverage. That's basically all they did with him at Michigan. Press man, play on the outside. And, you know, I think they probably wish he had a little bit better zone feel and instincts at the position. But, like, you could go Moseley in the nickel, and Charvarius Ward and Ambry Thomas would be one of the better press man, just cover one duos in the league. Like, I feel very good about Ambry Thomas. So there's a raised floor element with the Samuel Womack thing that leads me to not be as worried about it, because if he truly sucks, this is a smart staff. They'll adjust. They have the pieces to potentially upgrade easily by just moving Moseley into the nickel and putting Ambry Thomas out there on the outside. So I like that depth. And I think Ambry Thomas will play in certain dime packages. where they can use him as a matchup corner and do some of that press man stuff all across the field. So he is a piece that's going to be on the field, whether it's in base nickel or not. And then you have some other interesting corners as well. A couple of young players I like in Diamador Lenore, who's a really good zone feel, quick athlete type, kind of a poor man's Emmanuel Mosley. And then Tariq Castro-Fields is kind of a poor man's Ambry Thomas in a lot of ways. I think they see all of the same things I saw in Ambry Thomas. I also saw in Tariq Castro-Fields coming out of Penn State. Really good man technique, had a dominant Senior Bowl performance, a quick, high-speed athlete that, just didn't have the highest, I guess, like field awareness, didn't always close those gaps. The ability to squeeze routes and react quickly on the fly wasn't always there. You did see him get beat, but the tools are there for him to develop, so I like that pick. And then Jason Verrett's still hanging around here. You obviously can't really count on him, the most injury-prone player I've ever seen, but he's still on this team. He's on the pup, and hell, if he could play, that's another piece that they could have here. So it's not some dominant group of corners, but I think this is going to be a pretty good secondary there with those corners. The safety group has its questions in its own right, though. Not with Jimmy Ward, although Ward is 31 years old. He's already not the best athlete in the world, so there could be some regression coming for him, but it's hard to predict that. I mean, he was really good last year. He's a perfect scheme fit here. Kind of a classic case of something I've talked a lot about in this series of taking a converted slot corner and having him thrive as a quarters split safety, where they're running a lot of man coverage. Those quarters assignments are very similar to man assignments that those slot corners are used to. And yeah, he's just a really good safety that I expect to be good again despite his age. The other safety next to him is where you are probably going to have some more legitimate question marks. I like Talanoa Hufanga, who seems to have won this starting job. Incredibly instinctive player, good ball skills, and really physical against the run, but not a good athlete. I would compare him to Taylor Rapp for the Rams, who they're kind of trying to bench right now. Just someone that in those man-to-man situations that he will be asked to run, I don't trust him in those scenarios. Cover two, sure. Drop him into a hook zone, absolutely, but a limited coverage player for sure. So you're going to have some questions there from a coverage perspective, and you don't have a lot of great answers. Tavares Moore seems to be competing there for the second safety spot. He's a much more athletic player. Like if you could put Hufanga in Tavares Moore's body, you would get a crazy good safety, but you can't do that. Very opposite options there. And then you got George Odom, who's kind of a healthy balance. I like George Odom. I think he provides an option if Hufanga really stinks. Someone that played well in limited opportunities for the Colts. He's an incredible special teamer and a really physical player. He's not a horrible athlete and could be a decent coverage player. So they have three options there. And then even Tayshaun Gibson, if he makes this team, might be their best strong safety. Really slowing down, getting up there in age, but a really heady player that knows this system well. He's played in similar systems with teams like the Bears most recently, so he could be an option if he makes this team. They have depth. I don't think it's going to be the worst safety group in the league, but it's certainly far from the best. So it kind of makes sense that they're a middling secondary, 16th in the league, but in general, a group that I think can be more than good enough given how good they are on the front end of this defense. And I actually have them ranked as the 4th overall defense in the league, which I think is going to surprise some people, but that's obviously potentially the biggest reason the Niners are coming in here ranked 4th in the NFL as a team. A little bit better against the pass than they are against the run, where at times they might be a little bit squishy up front with that defensive line. But from a pass defense perspective, I have them 2nd in the league, where they're going to get after the quarterback as good as anyone in the league, ranking 2nd there. And if Kinlaw is good, they will probably be the best pass rush in the NFL, the best duo of linebackers in coverage, and then just a solid, good secondary on the back end, led by D'Amico Ryans, who to me is an ascending superstar head coach, or at least soon-to-be head coach. But let's tie a ribbon on this. Let's get through the final recap for the Niners, and then we'll look at their schedule, their Vegas over-under, and my win total expectations for them. So 4th overall as a team, 8th on offense, 4th on defense, and a tier 2 special teams, really good on that side of the ball. Robbie Gould still has it. They've got a good punter and a lot of depth with the linebackers and the defensive backs who can make up a really good coverage unit for their kick game. One more look at their strengths and weaknesses as a whole. This team has a lot of strengths. Coaching on both sides of the ball that we've talked in depth about. I love this team's culture as a whole. I think they might have a rabies infection, not just with that defensive line, but how aggressive these ball carriers are and how physical this team is after the catch. This team is, I would say, the most physically minded team in the NFC for sure, maybe in the entire NFL. And then I see this as a team that's going to have an infuriating run game to try and defend, and that's going to play off all of the dominant run after catch ability that this team has on play action and the screen game that is in part some of the run game. Everything is going to play together so beautifully here. This offense, I cannot wait to watch it operate. And then for the defense, this pass rush is incredible, and they have awesome linebackers behind that defensive line. So it's going to be a defense cooking with gas this year. The weakness is pretty clear cut. You have essentially a rookie quarterback, and if this team can't stay on their game script, stay ahead of the chains, how good is their drop back passing game going to be with Trey Lance and with their other big weakness here, that interior offensive line? That is very concerning. And then the last weakness is, like potential weak links in the secondary that we just talked about. Strong safety and slot corner. But let's take a look at this team's schedule. Their Vegas over-under is 9.5 wins, lower than our last couple teams, and their Super Bowl odds as well, lower than our last couple of teams as well at 15.5 to 1. But needless to say, I have them going over. I have them at about a 10.5 win projection. The payout isn't great betting the over, but I still think they have a pretty damn good chance of going over. Their schedule's not terribly difficult, to be honest. They have, to me, 7 likely wins on the schedule. Seattle twice in their division. They play the NFC South, so I think Carolina and Atlanta are winnable games for them. They start at Chicago. I can't believe, by the way, that they're 7-point favorites in that game. They should be 13-point favorites, in my opinion. I'm going to be doing my weekly picks every week on Patreon, by the way. So if you want to support my channel, you want to get exclusive content, check out my Patreon. It's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. We'll see you guys over there. But to tease a little bit of a bet, 49ers -7 week 1 is one of my favorite week 1 bets in a long time. I think they crush the Bears. This pass rush is going to suffocate Justin Fields. But anyway, I have them with 7 likely wins there, giving them a good baseline. If they just win the games they're supposed to win, you're looking, they just got to pull off 3 more wins to get over. They have some really tough games in the first half of their year, so don't be surprised if this team starts 3-4, 3-5, and you're telling me I was wrong on the Niners. Give it a second, let Trey Lance get acclimated, and get to the second half of that schedule where they have a bunch of home games and a bunch of games that I think they'll be able to take care of business. And finish the season strong and get hot and scary into the playoffs, just as they did last year. And the thought of a 49ers team gaining momentum with a high upside quarterback like Trey Lance, I think 15.5 to 1 to win the Super Bowl is maybe the best value on the market right now for Super Bowl bets. Like, this team's going to be really scary. They got to figure out a couple things, but I trust them to figure out that O-line. I trust them to kind of patch together this secondary, and I think Trey Lance is going to be, I don't think he's going to be like a superstar, but I think he's going to be pretty dang good and better than what Jimmy Garoppolo did for them last year. So I'm a little bit surprised that so many people were surprised that I had the Niners at 4. Definitely let me know. Did I convince you? Are you in now? Or are you still worried? Would you still rank this team a few spots lower? Definitely let me know in the comments down below. Really hope you enjoyed nonetheless. And please do hit that like button if you're still here. Make sure you subscribe. We got 3 more of these yet to go. And we'll see you guys soon for the next one. Peace out.